Hello, Year 5. Hope you're doing well. I hope you're having a nice week. Good to see you again. Remember, last two lessons we've been looking at Christians and how they respond to war and conflict. We looked at a group of Christians, well, some of them are Christians, some of them aren't Christians, called the Quakers. And we looked at the Bible, and we looked at how the Bible gives kind of slightly mixed messages to Christians about what's good and what's acceptable in terms of violence. Today, we are still looking at mostly at Quakers, but we're looking at this question of what is a pacifist. So it's quite an unusual word to spell and to say, but it's pacifist, not pacifist, but pacifist. So what is a pacifist and what do they believe? In the booklet this week, we've got two fairly straightforward questions to answer. One, well, what is a pacifist, which hopefully we're going to learn in about a few minutes, and two, about the white poppies that we're going to look at later. Now, all Quakers are pacifists, but there are lots of pacifists who are other types of Christian or non-religious at all. So we're going to learn about pacifists in general here. Okay, so last lesson we looked at these four Quaker values. Do you remember what they mean? So I'm going to pause for a moment and I'd like you to tell me what peace, equality, simplicity and truth means. Okay. Might need to pause the video there for a second. Peace, of course, is about opposing violence, and that's pacifism that we're looking at today. Equality is about making sure that people are equal and fairly treated. Simplicity is about not buying and using what they don't need. And truth is about wanting to seek the truth in the world. So Quakers are pacifists. This word pacifist comes from the Latin pace, P-A-C-E, and that's the same as the word peace. So the word peace and the word pacifist both come from the same original meaning. A pacifist is someone who believes violence is always wrong. They oppose war and conflict, and they try to bring about peace. Pacifism comes from the Latin word pace, meaning peace. And there we go. There's the answer to your first question. What is pacifism? Well, pacifism or a pacifist is someone who believes violence is always wrong, and they oppose war and conflict and try to bring about peace. And here you can see some symbols of pacifism. The dove holding an olive branch, that's a very famous symbol of pacifism. This is another symbol of Quaker pacifism. And this is a white poppy. It's not black and white, it's a white poppy. It's got the word peace in the middle of it. That's something we're going to look at a little bit later on in this lesson. You may have seen people wearing white poppies, or you might have seen white poppies out and about around November. We'll find out what they are and why they're out. Okay, so how do Quakers actually show this belief in peace and pacifism? This is a protest. I wonder if you know which building this is here. That's the White House in Washington, D.C. So this is a protest outside the White House in Washington. And this says, Quaker meeting for worship for peace in Vietnam. And do you remember how they worship? It was in complete silence. So they're meeting here to worship in silence against the war that happened. The United States went to war against a country called Vietnam. So they're protesting, they're showing their opposition to war, showing their opposition to the war in Vietnam by meeting silently and peacefully in protest. So one way is by protesting. Quakers have a long history of protesting against war. This is a Quaker protest against the Vietnam War. Do you recognise the location? Well, we've asked and answered that already. So here's one way in which they are showing their opposition. But this is happening about 50, 60 years ago. Let's have a look at a more up-to-date version of how Quakers show their opposition to war. Here is, this is in East London. So here they are protesting against an arms fair. Arms means weapons, so that every year at the XL Exhibition Centre they have a weapons fair where the governments of the world can come along and buy guns or bombs and mines in order to use in war, and Quakers are there protesting against it. So they are protesting against the arms fair, which takes place every year at the XL Exhibition Centre in London. At the arms fair, governments from around the world can see what kind of weapons and technology British companies can provide to fight in wars. Why would Quakers oppose this? That's a good question. Why would Quakers oppose this? Well, it's because one of their values, remember, is peace. And we see it here on this sign, Quakers for peace. This is what they are protesting against. They are protesting against the use of these weapons in war. So it's a big thing, happens every year. There's always different Christians from different areas, but lots of Quakers. This person here wearing a t-shirt saying Quakers for peace. So another way in which Quakers show their commitment to peace is through the white poppy. In November, Britain remembers all those who died in wars as part of our remembrance ceremonies. I'm sure that you probably remember last year having a moment of silence, maybe watching it on TV, maybe seeing ceremonies taking place in your community. Traditionally, people wear red poppies and lay wreaths of red poppies to remember those who died. So you can see all these people here are holding wreaths of red poppies. This is the poppy that you're probably very familiar with, that the Royal British Legion sells. That's because in the battlefields, after they churned up all the mud after the war, poppies began to grow. And so they wear these red poppies to remember war, to remember the victims, the people who died in war. White poppies are worn by many Quakers and pacifists instead of red poppies. And they're produced by a group of people called the Peace Pledge Union. And they represent, according to the Peace Pledge Union, remembrance of all victims of war, a commitment to peace, and a challenge to attempts to glamorize or celebrate war. Then this is really controversial stuff. A lot of people get very upset about red poppies and white poppies. So let's try and look at this as best we can. Number 3 there is what's really controversial. They say that the red poppy glamorizes and celebrates war. So they mean it makes war seem like a good thing. It makes war seem like a positive thing. You would have to decide for yourself whether you think that's true or not. They also say that the red poppy kind of almost like encourages more war. It makes war seem like a good thing. It makes war seem like a positive thing. And not all people who wear the white poppy even agree with this necessarily. But it is a pacifist symbol. It's a symbol for people who don't agree with war. Some people actually wear a white poppy and a red poppy, and you might see wreaths put onto local war memorials that have both red and white poppies. So here, the last question of the day here is, what is a white poppy and why do people wear them? Well, the answer is on this screen here. It's the poppy that pacifists wear. People wear them to remember all victims of war, as a commitment to peace, and a challenge to the attempts to celebrate war. It's not even necessarily that they would argue that a red poppy celebrates war. It's just that generally they see like films being made and television being made and events happening that make war seem a bit glamorous, a bit exciting, a bit like a good thing, which they oppose. So last slide today. Often local peace groups and Quakers lay wreaths of white poppies alongside the red poppies on a war memorial. Here we can see that. So this is a wreath of white poppies with the words "never again" amongst all the red poppies. Do you think this is a good idea, and why might a Quaker choose to wear a white poppy? So have a think about that. Do you think this is a good idea? I've already said that it's very controversial. Just to give you an example, in the village that I live in, actually, last year, someone took the white poppies and put them in the bin because they weren't happy. They thought that they were somehow offensive to the memory of the people who died in the war. So it's really controversial. It upsets a lot of people. But obviously some people think it's very, very important to oppose war, and some people think it's important to oppose the white poppy, I suppose. So you'd have to decide for yourself when you get old enough, are you going to wear a red poppy? Are you going to wear a white poppy? And why do you think a Quaker might choose a white poppy? Even if you disagree, it's really important to know and understand why other people choose to do these things. Good, so that's today's lesson. I hope you enjoyed that and found it interesting. Next lesson we've got, we're looking at how Christians could ever decide whether it's right to go to war. Obviously some Christians do go to war. Some Christians even are in charge. They might be the president or the king or the queen when a war takes place. So we're going to look at the question of whether it's ever right for war to happen, and Christians have a sort of system for working that out. And I will see you then. So have a lovely weekend. Enjoy the sun if it is going to be sunny, and I'll speak to you in a week's time. Goodbye, Year 5.